back to the Blue Chip Academy podcast. We're jumping into the Blueprints of Success interview series, providing unique blueprints, tactical knowledge, and best practices to navigate the critical points in the sports ecosystem so you can devise a plan to a career that you can bank on. So today we have founder of the GenAgency influence and marketing group, Rachel Maeng. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm out here in LA. It's a little bit cloudy, but it is like in the mid 70s, so I can't complain.
Oh, dang, I wish we had the mid 70s. Everybody knows that this is a critical time. You know, we talk about sunny weather, and it's the best time to get some photos and then get some content and all that good stuff. So that's why we have Rachel here, you know, because with the Gen Agency and all the things that she does at the influence and marketing agency, I mean, it's good to have good lighting when you get out there and get into the content and all that good stuff. But we all know that NIL is a big piece of what we're covering today, and just how to, not so much from the rule standpoint on how to do those things, but how to actually navigate and build your brand, the tactical steps in that. But before we start off, we just ask a little cornerstone question that we like to ask. What's one piece of advice that you would give to a family or athlete that's getting ready to go into the college space with this whole NIL ecosystem growing?
I would definitely say do your research. I know everyone says that, and there's a lot of resources out there, but understanding the college that you're going to, the state laws around NIL, also the, I guess, like ecosystem that you're jumping into, how do they support their athletes, what career services they have afterwards. I think knowing all of that is really important because college ends, and so does being a student athlete. So it's really about what comes after that that matters.
That's a great point. And just we know that going into the college space, like there's a lot of relationships, the power cities that you're connected to, and all those different things. And like we talk about all the time, NIL presents business opportunities at such a young age, and being able to identify them, activate them, and really just capitalize is a learned skill, right? Some people might be just naturally charismatic to go through the process, but we'll jump into all those tactical things. Let's jump back to a little background on Rachel. So Rachel, growing up, sports background per se?
Yep. Yeah, I grew up in Syracuse, New York, so big on basketball, decently big at football. We're still growing. Grew up there, played a couple sports in high school, ended up going to Rutgers on a scholarship for rowing. So always had that sports mentality.
Oh, that's amazing. So how was your experience in high school? I mean, you said multi-sports. You said you ended up getting a scholarship in rowing, but did you play other sports?
I did, yeah. Right around high school, I ended up with field hockey, rowing, and track and field. But ultimately, I decided I wanted to go to college with rowing. So by my junior year, I was full rowing every season.
So that's cool. I mean, rowing's a sport that I don't know if our listeners know too much about. So how does one get into rowing? If we like what age do you start? Is they go to a rowing club? Like, where is like
it's such an interesting sport, you know. It's only certain locations actually have rowing. You have to be by a body of water, but really like the college also has to have some sort of interest to really, you know, push it on the high schools. So we're a suburb of Syracuse, Baldwinsville. And that's really how I started was when I was a freshman, actually. That's when I had started on the rowing team. But funny enough, a teacher suggested that I be a coxswain, which is the position I was. It's kind of like a captain, but also someone who like develops a race plan, works with the coach to strategize, and also like work on the rowing techniques. One of the teachers had suggested that I would be a very good boss. So told me to go out for the team, ultimately made the team, was a coxswain, won a couple state championships, went to nationals twice. So it was a good time. And then, you know, did just a small flex, did that in high school and then ended up getting recruited to Rutgers.
Oh, that's impressive, and congratulations on all those accomplishments. So when does that recruiting process in rowing start?
You know, it's, again, like rowing is so interesting that it's not like a typical football sport, soccer, basketball, where you're really seen like at a young age. You can start rowing when you're young, but it's normally because, you know, you have a community program that tries to teach you rowing, and it's very open, very relaxed. So I started my freshman year, and lucky enough, Syracuse is right there. So the coaches at Syracuse really like that higher level rowing. They can kind of see you. And then a lot of it is actually on your own. So platforms like Be Recruited back in the day, and things like that, recruitment platforms for athletes. You would create your profile, and then you would have your film go around to different coaches, and eventually colleges would kind of pick up your name. And then from there, it was, within NCAA compliance, speaking to them, kind of like popping around their campus, looking around things. And then ultimately, my junior year, I got some good looks. And then my senior year, I maxed out all my visits. I got a lot of offers and ultimately chose to go to New Jersey.
Okay. So I guess my question is, I mean, how many people were in the boat when you guys were rowing?
So it's anywhere between 8 rowers and then a coxswain, or 4 rowers and then a coxswain.
So how does a college coach know that someone's a good coxswain?
So, I mean, a lot of it does have to do with like where the boat places. If they are going to states, if they're going to nationals, it's a good sign that like your team is not only good, but the coxswain is doing a good job. It's also a lot on the coaches. They know their team, and they know if their coxswain is acting as a good captain, if they're a good leader of their boat, they have a good head on their shoulders, they're good with responsibility, things like that. And then rowing is a lot where you do these campus visits, you go meet the coaches at like camps and things like other sports. But in talking to someone, especially when they're a coxswain, they're very calculated, and they really have that like good understanding and good head on their shoulders. And that's really what a lot of coaches do look for.
That's a great point. At the XFL, the director of our whole football operations, her name was Remy, and she was a coxswain at Michigan. And for someone that's never worked in the football world, she came from Pepsi and kind of ran the whole league and all the director of football operations. I used to talk to her about being a coxswain. She told me, and she was on the men's team, so she was,
which is
bossing
even
men
more
around
different.
or just making sure things are in order. But like that was the role of the DFO. And I'm like, and I always thought, I was like, man, a coxswain or somebody in rowing would be really good at like these different, whether it's managerial or leadership positions, and just keeping things in order, because that was the person that kind of did it for us. Going through the process, did you feel like it matured you a little bit faster, just the recruiting process?
Oh yeah, I think it definitely did. It made me understand like what a personal brand was so early on, and then really just like how to advocate for yourself. How to advocate for yourself, how to really like speak on your behalf, how to network, because as rowing, like it's not one of those like huge in the spotlight sports. So we had to make our own tapes, and then from there we developed like who we are as a person, who we are as a teammate, a coxswain, a captain, and then you're really like pushing that out to coaches, helping them understand who you are, and then even more so pushing out your tape, going to visit college campuses, going to camps, and like advocating for yourself as to why you should be recruited, because it is a sport that's not like in the spotlight. So you don't have all these other platforms really like pushing you.
That's interesting. You said like you had to advocate for yourself, and I always tell guys in football it's a little interesting because the good players, the top 2%, you're going after them, right? And the guys that kind of look for the attention, it's like a red flag a little bit. And then it transitions when you get into the real world, and you have to be able to sell yourself. Like you have to put yourself forward, whether it's on a digital resume or on an interview and different things of that nature. And I always thought that was kind of a messed up backwards thing where like the best players never really have to sell themselves because they're always getting showered. So that's a pretty cool head start that you had there I can't even say a head start for you, but for rowers, tennis players, or just other sports that aren't necessarily showered with attention. There's a different approach I feel that they go through the recruiting process with, like you said, where understand how to tell their story and their brand identity in a very authentic way. You know what I mean? So that's interesting to hear. So when you said that you played multiple sports and you decided to transition and focus in on rowing your senior year, what made that decision? What caused you to move that way with focusing on rowing instead of trying the other sports?
Yeah. I was pretty good at my other sports. I was actually pretty decent at field hockey. I got to play varsity when I was a freshman. I got to do a lot of camps with them. I got to travel with them as well. But ultimately found out I was at the best at rowing, which is funny because it was probably, of all the sports, my role as a coxswain was probably like the most unathletic version of like a role of a sport I played, because we're sitting there, we're inside the boat, we're steering, we're calling different race calls, we're doing strategy, but you're not like actively playing field hockey.
Yeah.
But it was cool. I think it gave me an opportunity to step back and have those sports and realize like I was the best at rowing. I had the best opportunity. these big schools had rowing, like in the Big Ten, some SEC schools, Pac-12, like they all have rowing. And I really wanted to go to a bigger university, one that had a great football program as well, but also one that was in a good media market. So I knew it was kind of going to set myself up with the best opportunity to not only be able to be accepted into a college, but also to be able to afford a college with a scholarship.
Right. I mean, that's a big point there. You say afford the college, afford the scholarship. Yeah, afford it. Yeah, most definitely. Did you ever, like, you end up going to Rutgers? Did you have an idea what you want to do after sports? Like, when you decided to go to Rutgers, like, was there anything that you were looking to study that Rutgers stuck out to you from your other college opportunities?
Yeah, so funny enough, when I went into college, I was going to start as biomedical engineering, and I was going to go down that pre-med route. Did my first 2 years in the biomedical engineering program, thought I was going to go into cancer research, and it's funny enough that it was in college that I actually realized that, you know, as much as I have a love for sciences, I came from a accelerated science program in my high school, so I already had a lot of credits done. I realized that in those 2 years when I was a student athlete, what really resonated with me was this like sports media space, but it was really this idea of representation, of personal branding, of like that professionalism. And I really realized about 2 years in that I wanted to start a company. I wanted to be involved in the sports and media space, social media kind of at that point as well. And it was funny enough that I was still at Rutgers. We're inside the New York City media market, so it was a great place.
No, that's a great point. I think people don't recognize that Rutgers is the power city there, being obviously New York. I mean, people know that, but when you think of sports, right, sometimes it doesn't get the best rep. But when you think of that 6-quarter thing where you're making the connections and the different people of that nature, I've had coaches tell me that you guys did a real good job of making those transitions for helping guys make that transition.
Yeah.
What was your best visit? I mean, going on rowing visits, I wonder how that was.
I think it, I think it's very typical of other sports visits. Maybe not like the same caliber as football. I would know. I did work for the recruiting team at Rutgers football, so got to see like them going bowling. We didn't get to go bowling when I was a recruit. I had a great time at Rutgers. I think I really loved that the campus had this like city aspect to it. It is in the middle of New Brunswick and Piscataway. I did get to go to the football game, which was awesome. Love that atmosphere. I went to other visits like Duquesne. I went to Nova Southeastern. So like all these different types of colleges and prominent rowing colleges. But ultimately, it was like the Rutgers experience that I think I had the best time with.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. You said you were a recruiting person or recruiting staff member, right? Like helping out in the recruiting department. So when we talk to some recruits that are going through the football department or just the process, what would you say is something that might happen on a visit that you've seen where maybe lost or cost a guy an opportunity? Any funny stories?
Okay.
Yeah, just to give some guys some games so they don't do the same thing.
Yeah. Definitely just, think about it like an interview. Like, I think one of the things that someone told me, one of my mentors was like, every day is like an interview when you're in a situation where there's the possibility for advancement. So especially on a recruiting visit, like you're in an interview there. You might be like the number one guy that's in their recruiting class that they're looking at, but they're still all things that they're looking for. Like they don't want someone that they're going to have to worry about compliance, especially with the new NIL rule. They don't want someone who's going to bring on some sort of drama, like going to bring something on their program that isn't going to look well. So they're always looking for a guy with a good head on their shoulders. They're looking for a guy who can communicate well, who actually speaks and doesn't just, keep his head down in his phone the whole visit. But yeah, I would say just be on your best behavior. Don't do things that will point a target at you, that will, make it seem like you could potentially be a problem in the future. I have to say, like, I don't think we really had any problems on our recruiting visits. They're pretty, standard, pretty simple as far as it goes, what we chose to do with them on campus, taking them to academic advisors to meet or professors in departments, all the way to even like going off campus to the standard, bowling or whatever they choose to do. So I think even when you're at that off campus place, same thing, like you're in an interview.
Absolutely. That's real. And I know when I had a group of interns and ladies that would take guys around, like had like a sheet where you had to give evals of their character. Like, okay, how did they act? Mm-hmm. How did they respond? Are they disrespectful to you? Did coaches or personnel ask you to do the same?
Yeah, pretty much. And I got lucky too because when I was a student athlete, we had a recruiting pavilion at the football games. And
Oh,
we had
that's
this
cool.
program where student athletes would actually come into the recruiting pavilion during games and get to answer questions from like the prospects, from the parents. And it was a lot of like, what do you expect on campus for like everything from classes to nightlife? Like, do teams hang out together? Like, how do you like your professors? Are they actually like helpful or do they look down at you because you're an athlete? So I got a good experience as a student athlete first before I ended up staying on with the program to like really be able to talk to these athletes and kind of have that understanding of like what these guys are looking for when they have questions and like how they may act or how their demeanor might be as a prospect. So I got like a little early insight to it.
Oh, that's really cool. And that happened during the game?
Yeah, it happened a little bit pregame. It was inside the recruiting pavilion, inside our stadium, and so like the prospects, they get to come to a game on their visits. So they would go into there first. They would do like a standard Q&A, and then they would go down onto the field, get to see a little bit of the pregame, and then go back up to their seats in the stands.
Yeah, most definitely. That's cool. That's cool. I mean, just to have that open conversation with other athletes, right? Because I know when we did visits, whether at Penn State or other places, it's sports specific. But I think that Olympic Village or just presenting an Olympic Village thing amongst the athlete is a very good recruiting tip, pro tip. Any athletic directors, DPPs, head coaches listening. Yeah, bring your other athletes around. It's cool to see that whole Olympic Village type situation going on.
Yeah, I enjoy that concept because I mean, like some of my best friends are former football players from when I was there. One of my best friends and my roommates were gymnasts, volleyball players, like basketball players, football players. So you really do, when you're in college, have this community of other athletes that have like shared experiences, shared grievances, and you get to spend a lot of time with them. So I think it's important to get to understand like what the environment and kind of like what the culture is of the other student athletes. So I really appreciated Rutgers for doing that for their prospects.
Yeah, it's really cool to do it at a game too, where it's more social and you're able to help the program, because Penn State transitioned that with their academic department. Once it was all just football by themselves, but then they opened it up to where it was all the sports coming into one place. And I mean, I think that was standard other places, but I saw the guys really like that. Obviously, you got the track girls, you got people all in the academic place, so it's good to go study. So like going into college, you already had interest in sports media and everything that's going on. I mean, place like Rutgers, people, you see money moving around, you're close to the city. Entrepreneur like yourself, you already had your head on straight. What would have been your NIL strategy at Rutgers?
Ooh, so it's kind of funny. I almost executed my own NIL strategy, really my own like personal branding strategy while I was there. Reason being because I always understood that like your personal brand is so important, like who you are and then who people think you are, and what you're able to do with that platform that you create. So when I was a student athlete, I was actually involved in a number of campus organizations. I did our unified sports program. I was in our SAC, which is our student athlete advisory committee. I was a representative of the rowing team. I was also in our student government. I actually held a position where I represented all the student athletes to the university, to our governor's board, to our chancellor. So did a lot of things there. Also got involved with some other programs as well. But I really understood like that. Again, like your personal brand is so important that building up a reputation was really important as you were a student athlete, because you already had that platform of being, someone on campus of this select 600 plus that has this opportunity to be seen in the limelight. But then on top of it, having all the other organizations I worked with, because I really did truly believe in helping all the student athletes, building this bridge between our student athlete group, our Greek life, our regular students and matriculating students. So I kind of did my own version of that. To the point where my junior year I actually got a chancellor's award for like the platform that we had built as like building bridges between all these students. So it was even in college, like I understood before NIL came about that it's like your personal brand that matters. And if you have that platform to speak from when you're going to look for opportunities, whether it's jobs at that point, what was I was thinking, or as an NIL athlete that's looking for brand partnerships, like you have a body of work to speak from.
That's a great point. And I love the fact that you say like just connecting the dots and building that platform. We see it from a lot of athletes that we speak to on the show, where there's a level of the higher you get in sports, the more competitive it gets, right? So like the pressure to perform gets higher. So a lot of people think that you need to focus more on the sport, but a lot of times you see like the really successful people or people within sport or anywhere just have some other things going on so that they have leverage to actually enjoy the sport. So like hearing you say at your student council doing these different things, and it kind of puts things in the right bucket, right? For where you put your energy, where you continue to grow at, and then you have that experience when you're at Rutgers now starting your own agency, but you kind of have the confidence that you've been doing it when you were at Rutgers as a student athlete. Did you see?
I think it's important.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think it's important too. Like, I think that media and just like even student athletes ourselves, like we forget that you're a multifaceted person. Like as a student athlete, you're not just a student athlete. Like you don't have to just be like the best player on the team. It's incredibly hard to be a student athlete and do those things. But in the time that you have left, Rutgers is doing a great job right now of having people in SAC, like having them on these other committees. But even at other schools, if you are part of the student government or you want to join a club or if you want to join Greek life, if your athletic director like lets you, I think that's a really great way to make yourself more than just a student and an athlete. Like they want to see that there's more to you than just you playing your sport. And when it comes to personal branding, when it comes to like NIL opportunities, if you're only an athlete, a clothing brand isn't going to look at you and think that, you have good style and that you could promote their clothes, or a local business isn't going to think that, you eat their food or that you would be a good promoter of their food. Because if you only see that this person on social media and through the school is only an athlete, like that's the only thing that you can really promote.
And that's very true. And especially when you think of like the popular brands that think guys like, whether it's promoting songs or it's like Jordan, it's like, no, like actually the more authentic that you get with yourself or knowing yourself. We had a guest that Ryan Mundy who said like, hey, the number one thing going through this process is knowing yourself, because you know which ways and opportunities to take versus falling into traps. But with this whole NIL process, you see a guy that may be into lawn care, just for example, right? But that's where like Home Depot and different places like that come in. And it's just like those big deals, and that's authentically curated. I mean, I forget what the player was with the Philadelphia Eagles, but he was into hunting or whatever. And I remember like Big World Hunting came in and did something, but like those real niche type of interests as an athlete, when you get eyes on it, it's like you invigorate like a group of people that's like, oh, I can identify with them. Like they're into this thing. Like you see what we see
like
with
you
e-gaming.
find your community.
It's your community. We see with gaming now, right? Like where guys are coming up and it's like, oh, jumping on Stitch, like, or not Stitch, but whatever this stuff is called, like
Twitch.
the streaming, whatever. Yeah. Showing my age. It's all good though. So you always wanted to work in sports, like knowing that. So what was your first gig once you transitioned out of Rutgers?
So actually in Rutgers, I was lucky enough, I had 5 internships as an undergrad. So my first one was with the PGA Tour. I was the quintessential intern, running around with like a fat head of of a golfer, trying to get pictures like with the fan experience, tweeting out when like Twitter was kind of like, starting to get cool. So I had my quintessential, intern experience doing the grunt work. Was with Main Events Boxing, was with US Rowing, which is the Team USA part of the rowing side. Did everything, did sports sponsorships, did data management. And then my actual first job coming out of college was a recruiter, so like a headhunter. That was really interesting because I got to know a little bit more about the HR side of things. And then my next job and my actual last job was working for the New York Mets in their sales department. So my kind of theory behind, everything that I did as far as internships go, all the way to that last job at the Mets, was I knew I wanted to start at a company. So I knew I would need to understand the different departments of a company to be able to run one. And then also, in the sports space, understanding athlete relations, community relations, logistics, data management, which was obviously going to be a huge thing. Even back then we knew. Those were things that I wanted to make sure that I had under my belt and that I could speak from.
Oh, that's a lot of didactic experience and just like crossing over. I mean, that's really cool. How did you get your first internship at the PGA, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, so actually, The PGA had reached out for interns to our athletic department to see if we had anyone that could do that grunt work. Surprisingly, that was the first internship I got. My name got pulled up from our athletic department and then went through that interview process and ultimately got to that job. So I was lucky that my first internship was in the sports and media space because I was in their marketing department. And then it was that experience and that like big name that I used to really get myself into the doors and get myself into other internships.
That's interesting. I mean, you've been talking about branding all day, and even from just a corporate branding standpoint, right? Like working at different companies. You said like, working at the PGA as your first stop carries a lot of weight. I know when I went to Penn State, or just everyone that I worked with at Penn State, I was there with like 7 different head coaches, guys that came up from GAs that are now offensive coordinators and coaches. But a lot of times it's based on the brand. So I'm going to shift back to that point when you said you were a headhunter and recruiter, because, at LIG, we're a strategic talent acquisition firm. So sometimes crossing these things up and just understanding the ideas and the bridges that are between sports, and sometimes just identification and talent acquisition. How much is your personal brand weighted when you're as a headhunter, when you're going through looking for different applicants or different candidates? How are you looking at their personal brand?
I think it's important, especially in today's age. Social media, SEO, internet presence, it's all really big. So that's number one, a good thing to remember. But number two, recruiters will always be looking at those things. Even in my position now, when I go to hire staff, I do look through their social media. I look through any internet presence they may have, anything they may have said, because it is important to know the person that you're going to be hiring or the person you're going to be placing in jobs. But even more so, like your personal brand, if I can see from your social media or from maybe an article you wrote or something that you have a true interest in what our company does or where we're going, or you're just passionate about something and I can see it, I get a better understanding of like who you are and what you're interested in, like what you're about, to your character and your morals. So I think it's really important when it comes to personal branding to be able to show not only your personal brand, but showcase it in a really positive way.
I love that you say that, especially when it's like essentially filling in the pixels for everyone that may be looking at you or getting to see like what kind of candidate that you can be, right? Because from the other side, like I always, from the evaluation standpoint, I'm trying to fill in the pixels. I'm trying to understand like, okay, every little thing, the personal makeup, the family background, this, that, the third. But, if a candidate is going out and putting those different pixels out there, it's again, knowing yourself and putting yourself out there. It does actually goes a long way. So man, now that's very interesting. I like to cross up this stuff with talent acquisition, recruiting, and everything. I mean, recruiting is talent acquisition at the end of the day, but it comes down to evaluating and being a desirable asset, whether you're at a company or starting your own business, and a desirable asset for people who want to work with you. So, I mean, what was your most, from all the internships, like, what was the best one, if you don't mind me asking?
I think they're all great. I couldn't say like one was a favorite, but I think one that was really defining in my career was when I worked with US Rowing. So that was my first, everyone hands on deck. Like I got to do so much work, got to have my hands in so many great projects. My director, Liz Suter, she was in charge of the athlete relations at US Rowing. It was actually the 2016 Rio Olympics year too. So I got to be part of the conversations with the USOC. I got to do presentations about Zika virus. I got to work with the podium close. I got to work with some of the other gear and items that the athletes went with. It was a really cool experience. But I think it also allowed me to understand like how much work was there, and she let me run so many different things. Like she let me run a couple aspects of the men's US Olympic trials, and for me that was something that obviously I hadn't done before. It was a huge responsibility, but it brought me up to that level. There was things where there was issues of volunteers or like small things on the course because rowing we're on the water, and she would just tell me like, hey, like take a deep breath. How are you going to fix this? Like, what are you thinking of? How are you going to problem solve? Like, how did you plan for this? And like having one race where we didn't have enough volunteers, going into the next race, she's like, hey, like I don't have to ask you because I know you learned from the last experience of not having enough volunteers. So you planned a bunch more volunteers to make sure we had enough. So it was really like my first internship and my first job that someone gave me all of that responsibility. and I like fully understood like what the job was going to entail. And I think I did so many things that I never would have at another internship because I was given all that responsibility. So it really allowed me to have all these other internships where after that point, I had already been through the fire of like an Olympic year, and all that stress that like everything else I was dealing with, even when I was at main events and we were working with HBO Boxing, like the little things that would come up, like they were not as big as some of the things that I had worked with before, or maybe even were as big, but like I had already gone through them, gone through the stress, so I knew how to handle them so much better.
Yeah, you're talking about a group of people, right? I wonder if main event boxing, was it a little simpler because you're just dealing with two boxers at a time, or it's, I mean, the events are a little set up. I
It was
don't know.
definitely
Maybe
interesting.
yeah, I bet. I know, like I like the different dynamics in sports and things like, but I just wonder. But I think that's really cool that you speak to about rowing, where it's like what identified as the best opportunity was the person that you reported to gave you a lot of opportunity to grow. Whether that's making mistakes and having the confidence or efficacy that you can close that gap and get there. Because I think that was like one of the best things that happened. Just the whole ecosystem at the XFL was where it was, I mean, it's a startup football league. So you're throwing things against the wall and you have different responsibilities as you're going up, whether it's not arguing, but talking with Fox and ESPN about the push times for the, for the NCAA tournament versus, you know, like what type of footballs to use and things of that nature. But
and like you get to wear so many hats that like it keeps you so well rounded and so ready for that next opportunity.
it brings you confidence too, right? Like your level of confidence was I can do this. Like, all right, well, this isn't anything because like you aren't arguing. Like Coach Hamilton didn't call you at 2 a.m. to talk about the 10-hour, the time limit that guys need to have, or arguing with head coaches and different things of that nature. That's really
and to that point too, I think it did give me confidence, and I think that's a big part of my career. But I think a lot of people's careers, once you have confidence and you can speak confidently on something you do know or something that you're still learning, I think that that's a really big component in not only just in general, but really in this like sports media space, in this space of personal branding, where like who you are and who you seem is just as important as who you are.
I mean, it really is, because everyone's trying to figure out who's who, right? Because everyone has a voice nowadays. Everybody's on. And it's like, if I'm using this person to either represent them, if I'm going to help build their brand, like, what am I actually working with? Right? Because I know that's how I view it, whether it's trying to build out Lockdown U, the brand at Penn State, or dealing in executive search, and you're looking through candidates, whether it's everyone has tactical skills once you get to the director level and all those different things, but which starts to separate people or just candidates, professionals, or just a matter of those different like side skills, right? Whether it's like the level of confidence that they have or at a level of self-efficacy, and just it's interesting that those tactical skills kind of go to the background a little bit, but they still matter. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, so and that's really cool that you say that from that confidence standpoint. That's something that I continuously preach. But we're going to take one quick break right here and do a LIG read. This episode is brought to you by LIG Sports Group, a strategic talent acquisition firm that specializes at this intersection of sports and business. We all know that sports and business is a fast-paced industries, and to have the best talent is key to your success. So we're the conduit to success when it comes to all things from talent acquisition, from high school to the executive ranks. So if you guys need anything, check in at www.ligsports.com. Jumping back into it with Rachel. Well, that's over. Now we get to the fun part, a little bit about GenAgency. So we talked. I mean, you knew earlier that you wanted to be in the sports media space, that you wanted to be an entrepreneur. So like, I love hearing someone that has like their acceleration plan ready, and then listening to you go through the tactical steps, right? Because like your journey wasn't by chance. Like I don't think you just fall into a PGA tour, right? Like you don't fall into that, and that's not just, I mean, or the main event boxing and things of that nature. And that goes to show like you took the initiative, connecting the things at Rutgers, on the campus with the athletes, from being a coxswain and just like natural traits, right? That we're looking for to be a leader or owner at the end of the day. So when we get to GenAgency, what inspired you to start it? Like, what was that moment where it's like, all right, I'm ready to jump out there on my own?
Yeah, I think, like you said, everything I did was really, really tactical, really planned. It was all part of strategy. Once I decided that I wanted to create a company that was in like the sports media space. And even then, I think, you know, as a student athlete, I saw there was a lot of things that maybe I didn't agree with, or that even in like the NCAA, even as a student athlete, like you may not receive. I kind of understood this idea of not having enough rights or just not being like fully represented. And I think that really resonated with me. So as I knew I was building out this company, I knew that that was a big proponent of what it was going to be. So fast forward through all the internships and jobs that I chose to take to help me get there. It was in 2020 that obviously when COVID started, people were kind of moving over to social media. TikTok actually hired me in their official Learn on TikTok creator to help move the platform from like a dancing and singing kind of social platform into this like DIY education, really like helpful video platform. So I helped the company through content move over to like education. So I was hired to specifically work on personal branding. So it was during that time in that program that I ended up meeting up with some other creators and another advisory position that I met even more creators that we kind of joined together. And started the agency. So at that time, I was already managing a couple smaller influencers. And then at that point, once we banded together, we really grew, started representing other creators, started working with a lot of big companies like Macy's, TurboTax, Jergens, and it just kind of grew from there. And since then, I really understood that the purpose of being an influencer manager and just being a person and advocate in that space was to help democratize it. I think from the influencer economy, from the media space, democratization is needed because there are a lot of influencers, content creators that are creating content for a much lower rate than what they should be compensated for whatever reason. You know, a company is trying to make more money, or because the influencer doesn't have the correct information as to how they should advocate for themselves, what they should price themselves at. And funny enough, a couple years down the road, it's now been 15 months into the NIL law passing that it's the same issues. Like student athletes don't understand the space. They don't understand how much they should be paid for their content. They don't understand how to reach out to brands, how to have that like formal conversation. And I think, you know, now that we've transitioned into being a couple years of a company, now we have this NIL component. I think it really hammers down the fact that this company, like who I am and what I want to do, is really about democratization.
That's amazing. I mean, I think it's needed too, right? Because with a lot of things that you see or you hear in the NIL space, is a lot. I mean, whether it's education from the standpoint of what is NIL, but not necessarily like how do we do NIL, right? Like, so that's why I really like the space that you're filling in. And especially it's cool that you went from TikTok to start your own thing with it being in the NIL space and all that good stuff. But you said, you said, wait, 15 months at
Yeah, so the NCAA passed the law 15 months ago that student athletes could make money.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Yeah, I wrote 15 months down, but I was thinking like, that's what I was getting to. With that, only 15 months, after 15 months, what are like some of the main difficulties that you've seen or that you've run into, whether it's with athletes, schools, or brands?
You know, I think the space, the most, I guess, correct way to say it is like it is the wild, wild west out there. Like the NIL law passed, and I think no one was fully prepared. Immediately, you saw kids getting like these $8 million deals, $1 million deals, but then you saw kids out there saying like, "Hey, give me $500 and I'll post on my Instagram." Like nobody really knew what was going on. So just some background, it's actually, there's a couple different components. So the deals that you see right now, these like really, really big deals, they are part of three types of deals. Deals can come from the collectives. They can come from schools and like, well, not schools, but kind of like alumni and things of that nature. And then they can actually come from like dual, which is both. So a lot of these huge deals that you're seeing, like this $8 million deal, it's from a collective, which is like a group of individuals, local business people, anyone with some sort of interest in the school, actually pooling money together and trying to get that athlete to go to that school. But technically, that deal that they're getting isn't contingent on them going to the school or being a student athlete. It's like a makeup of things like appearances, posting on social media, advocating for some sort of brand. So it's technically within what's legal. But the average cost for a student athlete brand campaign right now is like $1,500 and like some change more. It's really not that much. And those are the student athletes that are doing it right, are successful in the social media following that they have. Like maybe it is a local business asking to them to promote some sort of special coming up, or it's a national brand that has a footprint at that college and they want them to promote it to get more reach. So it's a very interesting space, at least on the money side. But I think on the student athlete and college side, like lumping them together, I think there's a lack of understanding of like what an influencer economy is, which is really like what we're throwing them into, is being an influencer on campus and on a national scale and using your personal brand and social media to promote for money. So I think there's a lack of understanding of like how to talk to brands in that space, how to price yourself out, what like legal stipulations as far as like owning your own content versus selling it, like all of those things I think are so not only misunderstood, but some people aren't even aware of them in that space.
No, I think it's because it's brand new in that space, right? Where your name, image, and likeness, whether it's the different trademarks that you're using from the school, like moving all around that different area is extremely it's sticky, right? Like we're doing the Lockdown U asset at Penn State under the Blue White Collective, and it's been about 2 years of building the asset to the point where trademarks are going through, can be licensed out to local retailers so the guys can make money. More on a little more, I think, a little more sophisticated than like the post or it's more of a structure from a retail standpoint, not that, but like so if I'm a student athlete, I feel like there's a service that someone else can do for you. You come into a group, whether it was us, and we're like building it off of the school being an asset. So like Lockdown U lives at Penn State, so the brand identity, we can pick it off, but it's based on the collective. If I'm a student athlete or just an athlete and I need some help, brands are coming to me and I'm corny, I'm inauthentic. How can Gen Agency help me?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is first about finding out what your personal brand is. If you're a student athlete and, the only thing that you've thought about in your personal brand is like, I'm a football player at X school, like there's a lot more to you. Are you a family guy? Are you raising maybe like your younger siblings? Are you a community person? Do you love going out and doing community service? Like going to work with, different like programs in the community? Or are you a student athlete that also is really funny, goofy, like loves hanging out with your teammates? Like all those things are characteristics of you that you can really highlight on your social media. Like, and one thing that's great about social media is everything can go viral. So if you're on your, like, let's call it TikTok, and you're a goofy person, like you're a funny person, you can start making content from your cell phone, like doing all the TikTok trends, all the social media trends, and like that will help grow you, make you go more viral, and people see you as more than just like a student athlete. They see you also as this person who's like funny. Let's say like you're doing the dancing trends, like now they see you as a dancer. So I think there's other aspects that people should take about themselves and really like harp on them, like start building them out more.
It's a level. It goes back to confidence that we talk about a lot of time, but it goes back to like a little bit of being cool with making fun of yourself, right? Like being able to like, if I'm goofy, like lean into being goofy, or if I'm yeah. Because that's what people identify with, and it's real interesting that you say that, just coming from this space, because like everyone that we've talked to in the NIL space is typically as a lawyer, a legal background, and it's more so like make sure you read your contracts, make sure you do this, and I'm somebody who was like, all right, that's all cool, but like, how do you actually build it, right? Like, where does my brand identity fit in this place? Where does it fit in this area? So if I'm that's from the athlete standpoint. How can you help brands? How does the Gen Agency help brands?
Yeah. So, I mean, as a student athlete, I think one of the first things you have to do is, like we said, find your personal brand, but I think then it's build it out. And that's the part that you've built out of like who you are. And it may have been, like we said before, like this funny person who's on the team, who is also a student athlete, goofy, can dance. Like that brand is what brands like Nike, Adidas, like that's what they want to hold on to. That's what they want to grasp, is like who you are outside of that. Like you may have this really great platform, let's say like 100,000 followers, because you're a student athlete at your school. People like may follow that school and they're kind of latching onto you as a student athlete of that school, of that sport. But then as you show these other components, like you being funny, you being able to do dance trends, or like wearing good clothes, that's what the brands are latching onto. They're seeing like, oh, this is a person who their community, their followers really resonate with them as like the clothes they wear or the dances they do. So let's promote something that's relevant to that community, to their following. So let's say you're a great dancer. and you wear like really nice Nikes every single time, like a shoe company might come in and say, hey, we'll give you X amount of dollars to promote this new sneaker by just wearing it in every single one of your videos for like a month. Or even saying like you're doing a dance and then you say like, I cop these sneakers from XYZ brand. That's what they're going after, is the community that you have, the relationship you have with them, and that other component that you've built out.
I love that you get like into the weeds of actually, making things go viral or getting yourself out there, right? Because that's the one thing about a lot of different platforms. It's like, all right, you post something, kind of go build your brand, but it's like you're given the actual steps to do it. Like, and you can give me an example of something that you guys put on. I know you mentioned maybe not on here, but when we spoke before, the basketball player that was getting his haircut.
Oh yeah. So we've had a lot of different things go viral with a lot of our creators because they lean into their community, right? Like this one creator, he is a comedy creator, and like he got his hair edged up on the court of an NBA game, and like he is a comedy creator, and he does have a community that has a big affinity for sports, which means they like sports, they're interested in sports, they're willing to watch videos that have to do with sports. So he got leaned into that by doing something that was not only sports related but also huge on the comedy side, went viral, was on like ESPN, House of Highlights. Same thing. Like we have other sports creators. One of our big categories right now is trick shotters. So during COVID, a lot of people figured out like they could make these really intricate trick shots with like similar to like beer pong, but instead like, hey, let's put like rings around the cups. Let's also like have a swinging pendulum in there and see if we can still get the ball in. Like that's a trick shot. And those creators like really leaned into that, and suddenly they're doing these like crazy intricate trick shots, and their community absolutely loves it because like they're watching this video like, oh my god, how long did this take them? Like, are they going to actually get it, or are they going to quit and that's going to be the video? And like we have so many creators that built that up. Like we worked with Amazon, we worked with Ocean Spray, like a lot of really cool brands that wanted to lean into that audience of like someone just staring at a product on the screen as it's being used in a trick shot to get them to come to the idea that they should buy the product.
Makes perfect sense. And when you say that, like, it makes me think, my next question was going to be, what do you do if I'm an athlete and I'm just like so focused on sports that I just have a dry personality? Like, what would you do for me if I'm that guy? I was thinking like a Kawhi Leonard, right?
Yeah.
Like how they build the brand around
everyone
that.
Has like people like you, so there's definitely parts of you that people like, right? So I think it's exploring
what
if
I'm a player and I don't know that, right? I'm 18 years old and I'm like, I don't really like this, I don't really like that. Some guys are just kind of,
like maybe we don't know, and that's the thing. Like when we start working with athletes, we like to kind of first ask those questions, like maybe ask their family, their teammates, like, who are you? And like, I'll always rattle off a couple things, like, do you like doing community service? Like, how important is your family to you? What do you do in your free time? Do you watch anime? Like questions like that I think that they can answer to give me a little bit of insight. And then we'll kind of dive down that hole a little bit deeper. But let's say you're just figuring out, like you can start by doing all those TikTok videos in whatever fashion. Like, let's say you're like awkward. You can do the video very awkwardly. Maybe get your teammates in on it or someone on your team that already likes doing the trends, and just kind of doing them over again, like doing them in your own way. And as you keep posting about them, one will probably like go viral or get traction on social media. And that might be something where you realize like, oh, like I like doing that trend where I just said something to the camera, like really sarcastically. And you may be like a sarcastic person and it fits in perfectly. And then you lean into that. You're like, I'm gonna make more of these videos. I'm gonna do more funny songs, like more funny situations with my teammates and my friends. Like, I think that for everyone, like there's a way to find that thing about you that is still a part of you, but that you can like authentically promote and grow out to build out your social brand.
Now that's important because like, I mean, even work from a league operations office or different things. I think like you really value those guys that can do that, whether it's leaning in, it's just authentic. We talk about that authentic curation process that you're speaking of. Mm-hmm. I mean, you can, like you said, you can be awkward and have a brand. You can be outspoken and have a brand. It's just kind of, I think the key part is it being authentic, right? Like as if people smell the fake stuff, that's when it's like, that's not good. I won't put any assets around that. So like here at Blue Chip Academy, we try to make sure that everything, guys that have tactical plans, blueprints, so you can accelerate and come up with a plan like yours where you're working at Main Event, you're working at PGA, you're working at the Mets, you're doing all these different things to be able to build those confidence and those levers that when you want to start the Gen Agency, that you're able to do it. So like dealing with players on a lot of different bases, what type of players do you think should follow the entrepreneurial path? Like what traits and ideal personality?
I think entrepreneurship, it's really something that I think people are more open to now. I think it's so much more of the conversation. So many people say that they're entrepreneurs. But I think in the end, like an entrepreneur is someone who has an idea or wants to work in something that may not fit inside the traditional or like a regular business operations right now. Like what I do, the reason why I decided to go outside of working for an influencer management agent was because I really wanted to actually work on democratization. Like I offer paying our influencers for completing a contract for posting within 7 days of posting. We
Wow.
also offer them to be able to go to different events for free, be able to enjoy. We
I just
set up
stop you real
different.
quick. I just stop. I'm sorry to interrupt. Can I stop you real quick? I don't think everyone that's listening, that's in the space, understands what she just said. But like, if for her to go out there and get these guys paid after 7 days of posting, that is pretty impressive. A lot of the contracts that you might see is like 30, 60, 90 days been from when they agree to post. So like the democratizing of the athlete and the creator to get your money in 7 days. That's what I'm talking about. Because that's something that we look at Blue White Collective.
Yeah,
Or,
like
at,
even like in a regular, contractor job, like I think getting your payment on time when you want it is a common issue. And I think on influencer side, like you've got these young adults, people even maybe under the age of 18 that are struggling with getting these payments from these big companies because they're not maybe not the priority, or because like they have and they agreed to this very long payment structure. And that's a common problem in the influencer economy that like we want to help with, is paying them out on time. Like some people, content creation is their full-time job. Like you need to pay your rent. So like
Right.
things like that. We also have, like I mentioned, like the events. We'll put on all these really cool events where creators can actually meet each other, create content together, and hang out, which is also a problem in the influencer economy. Not meeting enough people because we're all like stuck behind our screens. So we'll do things like that, and then a number of other like gifting programs, press opportunities, and things there that those were my focuses when starting an agency, was being able to give these opportunities that are missing from the economy to make it a little bit easier for creators.
It's a great point that you made. I went to just a funny story. I went to the Jake Paul fight a couple months, like that was probably a year back. But it was like, it
Yeah.
was wild to me because I think it was before I started. I don't even think I jumped back on Instagram yet. But it was like, it was wild because it was creator celebrity paradise, right? Like there were like so many like teenagers and people that I never knew, I'd never seen before, but there was like groups of mobs of people sprinting up to like this teenager and this, and I'm like, oh, this is so and so, like this is this Twitch gamer, or this is this person, this is this,
Yeah.
and I'm like, oh, this is a whole different piece, right? Like Dave Chappelle's walking past and no one's saying anything to him, right?
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like this generation, like this Gen Z generation, is completely taken over. Like this whole celebrity aspect. Like people who have millions of followers. Like people are like, oh, I know who that is. Like I watch your videos, but now they're like Dave Chappelle, who's a great comedian, or like a celebrity, like a model. They might just be like, oh yeah, like that's so and so, like that's
so-
cool, but they're not this person who creates content and is like 22. It's such an interesting world and like word of the use of celebrity, like micro celebrities and everything. It's completely changed.
And that's cool that you're on the forefront, right? Like I love that. I mean, I always say that when you try to ride a tidal wave, that you can't ride out there when it's happening. You have to kind of do the work before, get out there and wait for it to go. And it seems like you did that, whether it's from the internships, the way you approached it in college, being a coxswain, while you're using your sport to a career that you can bank on. So that comes down to my last question. We can wrap this up. What do you see Gen Agency in 10 years from now?
Yeah. So we're actually going through growth right now. What we are right now, again, is like an influencer agency for influencers, brands, events, NIL. My goal in the future is to continue to grow out the influencer arm, to have a lot more creators under our name, but also creators that we also offer non-exclusive contracts, which means like you're not tied to us. You don't have to work with us, but when we have deals for you, you can work with us. I want to continue to grow that out to be a better representation of managers in the economy. I want to work with a lot more brands, like be official partners with other companies. And then I do want to grow our NIL side. I think that student athletes and even coaches, athletic departments, like they should have a better understanding of the influencer economy and how student athletes can build out their personal brands, grow on social media, and even have like really great foot traffic too. To leverage it for wealth and leverage it for opportunities both in college and out of college. So I would say the NIL is that area that we're growing out most rapidly and continuing to work on a lot.
it's a growing industry, and that's a great place to be. So where can schools, brands, companies, and athletes find you?
Yeah, so it's actually genagency.co, GEN agency.co. The links to all of our influencers, to all of our programs, everything that we do, along with our NIL course, is actually on that website.
And that will wrap it up. So thank you so much. And like you said, man, just having a blueprint have a plan, like Rachel said at the beginning, and she had a real plan, a detailed plan from just the actions that she took, whether it was going to Rutgers, transitioning and focusing on the rowing, going to the Mets, going to PGA, and all these different things that build up her confidence and her wherewithal to be able to start her own company and seeing the different opportunities that were coming about. And it's a funny story that everything that she's saying is true. I'll wait till the end. But, Rachel reached out when she was at the Mets while I was at the XFL, pitching some player development, different opportunities. And I was impressed when she did that and how detailed the thing was while she was still working at the Mets. And she told me her career plan and everything that was going on. And just to see, the development and continued growth from there to Twitter not Twitter, but to TikTok to her own thing is extremely cool to see. But it just goes to say that everything that she's saying now is just not for the podcast, but these are like tactical steps that you can implement into your process. So again, thank you guys. Like and subscribe to the Blue Chip Academy podcast. Make sure you check out LIG Sports Group for all your talent acquisition needs. So again, Rachel, thank you.